Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for coming tonight, spending your evening with us. There's so many faces, so many people here, and of course lots of familiar faces as well, so it's lovely to see you all. Anyway, before I talk a little bit about Cathkin Marsh, I want to thank you, Kevin. So thank you to Kevin Sinclair for inviting us to do this presentation, and for always being very gracious and complimentary of Neil's photographs. Thank you. I'd also like to thank Billy Gray, the reserve manager, for giving us this amazing opportunity to volunteer. It's been really fun volunteering, certainly alongside you, Billy. You're the most amazing fountain of knowledge, and it's been just so exciting learning everything from you as well. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Cathkin Marsh and why it's so special. We've been volunteering for over a year with the Scottish Wildlife Trust. Falling within our five-mile boundary, it certainly made perfect sense to spend our lockdown exercise time doing something productive, and certainly very fulfilling, and just giving something back to the planet, really. And just like many people in lockdown, it's great to reconnect with nature, and obviously where Neil goes, his camera goes. Yeah, so out of the 201 reserves that the Scottish Wildlife Trust maintains, Cathkin Marsh is actually relatively small. It's 11.45 hectares, but what it lacks in size, it certainly makes up in the diversity of the wildlife and the vegetation that's there. It's mainly, the area is mainly fen and marshy grassland. As you go to the entrance gate, you walk down the main path. You'll find to the west is all scattered willow scrub. There's a locally rare tea-leaved willow there, which makes it very interesting. And as you turn to the east side, you walk along the pathway. It's mainly grasses and reeds, and that also has a locally rare slender tufted sedge. Of course, with all this vegetation, that in turn supports all the important breeding populations of willow warblers, sedge warblers, grasshopper warblers, reed buntings, common snipe, jack snipe, just to name a few, of course. It's been really beautiful to spend the year just kind of going up and helping out, just seeing the seasons change as well. The colour just changes beautifully. It's alive with colour, obviously, from all the different flowers in the spring. You've got the pastel pink of the cuckoo flowers, through to obviously the wild angelica, ragged robin, and I love the buttery colour of the meadowsweet. But we just love spending time at the marsh. My favourite time, certainly, I haven't asked Neil, but my favourite time, first thing in the morning, it's just truly magical. Especially in winter, just everything's really sparkling, and you know, we obviously walk really silently down the path, and you'll spot a deer. It's really fun spotting the deer before they spot us. It's just like an eye-to-eye contact. We spot them, they look at us, we look at them until they run off, which is just lovely. Sunrise, I guess you can get golden hour in the morning as well as the evening, and that's my favorite time. As I say, just everything turns to gold. And we're often seen there before work. We're so keen, we do pop up sometimes before we go to work as well. So it's quite fun actually if we're running through the city centre to our day job, and we've got our wellies on, and we realise like all of a sudden we've forgotten to bring our work shoes, so we have to turn the car around to get back home to get our work shoes, obviously. One memory in particular, so I was at one point collecting just wild seeds, just obviously I want to have like a little wild seed patch in the garden, and I had my so we got to work, and I'd been collecting the wild seeds and hung my jacket up when I got to work, and I put my car keys in my pocket, realising my pockets were actually full to bursting of oxeye daisy seeds, so it went all over the floor, and I thought, oh. So that was quite fun. Neil's always very keen when we're there to try to spot something new. You always see kind of the same sort of things there, but now and again, you know, obviously it's really nice to spot something out of the ordinary. He's always got an eye out for an osprey, I wish, passing, or a hen harrier. But it's so funny because he'll always say, oh, what's that? And he'll take his binoculars at the camera and say, oh, it's just a regular buzzard, or it's just a regular robin. And I always feel like I spend half my time apologizing to them, because I'm saying, you're not just a regular robin, you're a beautiful robin. You're not just a regular buzzard, you're gorgeous. But anyway, there was just a little bit of information about Cathkin, and without me going on too much, I'll pass you over to Neil, who will start the slideshow and yeah, tell you a little bit more about his pictures. Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much everyone for coming tonight. This is a collection of photos from various formats. I've tried to put them in chronological order through the year so they make sense. And it will be a mix of basically what we've seen on this relatively small patch of land, but the variety I think you'll find is pretty incredible, really. So we'll just get on with some pictures if that's all right. So this first one is not my picture. I've pinched this one from Google, but this shows you the area of Cathkin Marsh. You can see from the bottom coming up, that's the entrance walkway, which you'll see just shortly. At the end of that, there's a hide going off to the left to the pond area, and the walkway goes round to the right. I'm pointing at it like you can see what I'm doing. So it's quite a small area. The walkway, unfortunately, running through the middle is no longer there, with no current plans to replace it. Many of the regulars think it's probably better for the wildlife that's there. Less people walking through the middle. Anyway, on to the next one. That was one of the opening slides. So this is really one of our first occasions up there. January last year, so just over a year ago was our first visit. This is the walk into the reserve. You walk down through the hedges. Always quite an exciting time because you never really know what you're going to see once you get through at the far end. Usually birds on this part as well. Quite often a fox as well. They venture up to the road. So that's always quite an exciting part of the walk. First slide with either of us. So last January, I bought a large zoom lens. We're both in retail, so we were in lockdown at the time, and I have always enjoyed photography and bought that lens that you can see in the picture. We were obviously going somewhere else because I don't normally wear jeans there, but yeah, that lens was probably the best purchase I've ever made. That I was taking this picture at the time. We'll start with the humble robin, which robin originally was Robert Redbreast, which eventually got shortened to Robin. At the end of the walkway, there's a little sign again giving you a map of the reserve and a few of the things that you might find at Cathkin. We've seen all of those. And this is the walkway. You're going to see a great deal this time of year. You definitely will see something, but it's certainly not a busy time of year when it's like that. Just near on the walk down, quite often you'll see bullfinches, which are always pleasant to see. Probably my favourite finch, although Jan would go for goldfinch, I dare say.
I love the goldfinch.
Kestrels. Kestrels are probably the second most seen bird of prey up there. Buzzards, certainly. We see buzzards more than kestrels, but there's almost always kestrels. In the winter, they tend to sit on perches to hunt more than hover, just to conserve some energy. I think this one's probably a young kestrel. Just by the colouring, could be wrong.
There's your beautiful golden light.
Yeah, lovely light. we get the low sun at this time of year. So, and again, there's the reserve with the single turbine up at Glasgow's highest point. Cathkin Braes is the highest point in the city of Glasgow at 200 meters or so. The pond was pretty much frozen at that point as well, so very little happening. One of my favorite pictures, again, golden hour, looking back across, there is a farm not far by. Heather and her husband run that. They're a lovely couple. It's always nice bumping into Heather when she's up there, and obviously she knows who we are. You always meet lovely people up there. Whiteley Wind Farm in the background isn't anywhere near as close as it looks there. It's probably 4 or 5 miles away. Just the telephoto zoom makes it look closer. That's looking back at the hide. And not much wildlife yet. So this will be in January. And frozen. Slightly closer view of the same thing. These trees to the left of the hide always have small birds in them. Anything from gold crests, reed buntings in particular during the winter, warblers in the summer, obviously. Usually something, so when you're in the hide, it's always a good idea to look behind you as well. Don't just look out the front. Magpie, golden hour. I only found out today that magpie comes from, they were called Margaret. Before it was shortened, they were Margaret Pie, shortened to Magpie. Similar way that Jenny Wren, they dropped Jenny. Jack Daw was Jack as in the name and Daw. So there's several bird names that were human names that they've since shortened. But that is, again, one of my favorite photos, just with the magpie taking off at the end of the day. Evening sun. So sometimes when you're up there, you may not see a great deal, but it's a lovely sunny, cold evening like that. It's just such a pleasant, relaxing place to be. Bit nicer when the sun gets a bit higher and things start to spring into life, but you've got to appreciate all times of year. Another robin, another interesting fact, as much as they're called robin redbreasts, they didn't have a name for orange at the time. It wasn't until the 17th century when they brought oranges here that we invented the word orange. So actually, they only were called redbreast because there was no name for orange at the time. So there's a good one for a pub quiz if you ever get that one. This will be coming towards the end of February now. We will soon start seeing some life, I think. Up at Cathkin, this is looking, the reed bed on the left there, which looks quite dark in the photo. That's a great place for water rail. This time of year, you will hear them screaming. Hopefully, most of you know what a water rail sounds like. Some people say it sounds like a piglet getting tortured. It's quite an eerie sound when it's as quiet as that. Reed buntings. Great looking birds, funny handlebar mustaches. Not a bird that I'd seen a great deal of before starting to go up to Cathkin. Definitely seem to notice them more in winter than summer. I don't think they're migratory, but could be wrong. I think they are resident all year. Just definitely notice them more in the winter, possibly less vegetation. They are quite well camouflaged when they're on the ground. As you can see there, they do blend in quite well, particularly in a grassy environment. part of what we do up at Cathkin is litter picking, general maintenance. Somebody had decided it was a good idea to spray paint this dog sign, so we cleaned that up. It's incredible the amount of litter, because it's a back road, really. It's a shortcut from East Kilbride through to Clarkston area. The amount of litter that gets dropped on the road by, I'm not gonna,
I have to say, not in the reserve itself, actually.
the reserve's generally quite good,
Yeah,
but the road along outside the reserve's usually very bad. Most of the dog walkers there are quite good, but then it is quite the path is relatively restrictive anyway, so it's a great tit coming into February. Interesting fact with great tits, they have about 40 different songs. So if you hear an unfamiliar song, there's a good chance it may be a great tit. Usually you can pinpoint roughly what bird it is by the song, but they are certainly quite good at disguising themselves. Another magpie. Buzzards. You almost always see buzzards up there. This one this picture was taken from quite a distance away, so I've cropped in quite a lot. Just slightly more unusual view of a buzzard taken off from, I think that's one of the fir trees over the north side. Yeah, thought that was quite an unusual view to catch. So when I'm up there, I use that big camera, but I'll also use my phone. I have a little camera for taking insects. It's the best camera is always the one that you've got. So if I've not got that big one in my hand, I'll use whatever, obviously whichever one's in my hand. Phone is always very handy. Quite often get geese landing in the fields just next to the reserve. I've included this one purely because they're all Canada geese, but if you look closely, there's a stray greylag that wants to be a Canada goose, top right-ish. Yeah. Apparently that's not uncommon for geese to end up in the wrong flock. This is another board about halfway round the walk, shows you some of the things that you could see up there. We've not seen bats, but we're not often up quite that late. We should really get up a bit later sometimes. And the only time that we see the sticklebacks is when the herons are eating them. Yeah, poor sticklebacks. Good variety of birds, insects, flowers, and mammals, in fact. We went through a stage for a few weeks of putting camera traps up at night and then having to go up quite early in the morning and retrieve them before anybody went through, just to make sure that they were safe. Caught some, the deer are very active at night, fox and its cubs. Yeah. They're really great things, but you obviously worry about having to leave them overnight somewhere public like that. So trying to find places to hide them and disguise the cable and the strap. But get some very interesting footage, what goes on when everybody's gone home. Blue tit. There's a big row of hawthorns along the back and the birds all love the berries along the north path. This one, we've got Red Nose Day coming up, and this one just reminded me of that. Yeah, definitely enjoying that. This is one of the reed beds where the water rails absolutely love it in there. Not great because they're hard enough to see at any point in time, but when they're in there, the only time we've seen one there is when it came out from when it was snowing to feed at there was a little bridge just to the left. That's the only time we've seen water rail in that bit, but you hear them quite regularly in there, so you know they're there. Nice safe place for them to be. Coming into spring, huge number of frogs up there, frogs and toads, but predominantly frogs. So many, in fact, if you do go up in the spring, really March, April onwards, it's a good idea to watch where you step in because they are all over the place. Unfortunately, there's a few don't make it on the path, but the birds of prey and the heron do hoover them up. The reason people don't see them is because when they're babies, they're about the same size as your thumbnail, although in the spring, actually, they'll be the bigger ones coming out to mate, so you should be able to see them. You can see the ripples behind them there, that's all frog spawn. The patches of water up there are absolutely full of frog spawn and frogs. So yeah, that's definitely mating season. You can see the water all around them already absolutely teeming with frog spawn. And with that many frogs, the herons have an absolute field day. Apologies if this one's a bit gruesome for frog lovers. Interestingly, if you look at the heron's eye, you can see its inner eyelid back when it's biting something. They protect their eyes with a clear inner eyelid, which you can see quite clearly in this photo. That heron, we probably saw it eat at least 6 frogs in a row. I don't know how they manage it. They do not stop eating. Do feel sorry for the frogs though. He was quite lucky he got away. Looks quite relieved to me. Yeah. This was you do get toads, but not in the same numbers. This toad was walking across the path quite happily. Frogs hop and toads walk, which is one way of telling them apart. And also toads look lumpier and frogs are usually smooth, so you can tell them apart. I had the small camera with a good close up with this one and got down on the ground to get that angle. This is quite an unusual thing. This is called star jelly. And for years and years, nobody really knew what it was. Recently, the Natural History Museum have analysed it, and it does turn out that this is regurgitated bits of frog or frog spawn. So this is likely to be the heron or magpie or crow has eaten too much and deposited that horrible lump of glutinous stuff, which really does look weird when you find it. Some people thought it was a fungus for many years as well, but it does turn out it is regurgitated. This is a big pond. Do get various ducks up there, usually mallards. There was a nice group of mallard ducklings this year, which most of them made it, I think. There's always a worry because there's so many predators up there. Obviously, mallards being most common duck. We had a period of a few days, and this photo was on my phone. Quality's not quite so good. There were a few days in April or May where every day we went up, there was a halo, an ice halo. So the conditions must have been perfect for that ice circle around the sun. And it was several days. It just seemed to be very cold, calm weather, and it was fantastic to see over the reserve. There was a slightly better one, not quite such a full halo, but you can see the effect it has. Really quite a nice thing to see up there. Apparently the halo is at a particular distance from the sun every time you see it. I guess it makes sense because you're standing in the same place. This was a long distance away, but a lot of people like this picture because it was two of the predators that you regularly see, but not often you get a picture of both of them together. So again, I've had to crop in a long way to show you this, but to have a buzzard sitting on the post watching a fox walk by, there is an abandoned wall that runs through part of it, and he was just walking perfectly by the buzzard at that point. I just wish I had a slightly better quality picture of it. Great to catch the two of them together though. Yeah, fox, this one, quite regularly see that one up there. You can tell by the kink in his tail. Obviously he's been in the wars at some point, scouting around the outside of the pond, looking for anything that's not paying attention. Yeah. Another one, probably herons are probably the most prolific hunters up there because they never seem to stop eating. Between the fish and the frogs and eggs and anything else they can get. This was a nice one just coming into land on the near side in front of the hide. First of the African visitors. So this must be mid-April, I would say. This is a sedge warbler in one of the reed beds singing away. Sedge warblers have one of the most complex songs of any birds. And those of you that know, they do sound quite angry a lot of the time. Quite interesting little birds. Yeah. Quite territorial as well, and certainly come and see you off. Another one of the predators, another kestrel, this one adult kestrel, but there seems to be an abundance of food up there for them. You regularly see them fly by with their dinner. This was a unfortunate vole, I think. Quite often when they're carrying their prey, they will circle you a couple of times. I don't know why. Normally they don't, but they do like circling when they've caught something. Another African visitor, a wheatear. This is one that I wasn't particularly familiar with before starting going up. Always nice to see a wheatear with the striking black mask. There's quite a few fence posts up there, which always provides good spots to try and get a photo. One of the more elusive, and again, not the best photo because I've had to crop in, but I've included this because you can clearly see this is a snipe, a male snipe, and the two feathers sticking out between the wing and the tail, they vibrate and make this very unusual noise. So in mating season, they fly up high, dive bomb, and those feathers make a very unusual drumming noise. Well worth looking up on YouTube or something if you've never heard a snipe drum.
I think they vibrate.
Yeah, they vibrate to make the noise. So yeah, quite unusual, quite hard to catch in flight. I will try and get a better picture of it. They're usually quite a distance away and traveling at speed. Stone chats. Regularly see stone chats up there. Again, great to see. Usually easy to find usually because you recognize the noise, which does sound like two pebbles hitting each other. They're quite small, slightly smaller than a robin, I would say. So if you listen, when you're out, listening is almost as important as looking, because you're likely to hear most things before you see them, depending on wind direction. Most of Cathkin is to the path is to the east, so the wind usually blows the noise towards you, which is a benefit, and also blows your noise away from any wildlife that's on the reserve as well. Is a record shot, again, a long way off. I've had to crop in. We've only ever seen one jay fly by up there. But you see them locally a lot more, but certainly up at Cathkin, only ever seen one jay, and I think they managed to snap. So it's in there just as a record. A Willow Warbler, another one of the summer visitors. It's incredible that these tiny little birds come all the way from North Africa just to go all the way back. Incredible, particularly when you think they only live 2 or 3 years, and how much energy and effort it would take to fly all this way and back every year, let alone the danger of the weather and predators. Much harder one to see. This is a Grasshopper Warbler. You're doing well if you see one of these. They are very hard to spot. I managed to get this picture. The next slide actually has a bit of sound, but I'm not sure it will work. We did have an issue with sound of it, so I'll try it and see if you can hear the Grasshopper Warbler. Hopefully you heard that. Otherwise, it just looks like a bird. This was a fantastic day. Hen harrier swooping over. Again, this is the only time we've ever seen one up there. Watching it glide slowly over the top of the grass hunting was pretty incredible. And I really hope we get to see them again soon. Unfortunately, hen harriers have been really badly persecuted by landowners, really, because they do take game birds. Hopefully we see the numbers rebound. Absolutely fantastic to see one up close hunting. We were right place, right time for this, in the hide, and it came relatively close. And one of the chaps we were with at the time, earlier in the same day, he'd seen a red kite fly over. So that was 2 slightly more unusual ones for the reserve that day. Red kite was at height traveling, but this one was definitely hunting. Great to see. One of my absolute favorites up there is yellowhammers. I never tire of seeing a yellowhammer up there. I think they're such fantastic little birds to see. You see them at Cathkin. There's also a little walk that extends slightly outside of the reserve where you're more likely to see them, but even along the road there, this picture I think was taken about 50 meters along the road from the entrance to the reserve. So they are up there. This one was particularly yellow compared to most of them. This must be a male just about ready to breed. Always nice to see. Lots of wrens up there. Again, noisy little birds. This particular picture I like purely because it's isolated so well at the top of the reed. Somebody actually asked me, they painted this and somebody's also cross-stitched it because they like the picture so much as well. So it's always nice when people like your pictures and want to turn it into art. So yeah, again, wrens listen for them because they do dart about low in the grass. Canada goose, there was a Canada goose tried to raise eggs on the island in the pond, but unfortunately I think she was unsuccessful. It was great watching while they were trying. I don't know whether the eggs were taken. There's a lot of predators there for them to raise fledglings. So quite often have duck fights on the water. This one, they were kicked up half the pond. When you're taking a picture of a song thrush and there's a yellowhammer sitting underneath it, 2 for 1. That was the hawthorn hedge along the back, the north side of the reserve. This is a meadow pipit. As you walk along, again, just sitting on one of the posts, but look at those impressive claws on its back toe, sorry. Yeah, slightly smaller than the rock pipit, but yeah, always nice to see. Up at the marsh, being a wetland and being in Scotland, you would think there would be a lot of midges. Now, you'll be glad to know these aren't biting midges. This was it looks bad, but luckily not affected too badly by midges up there at all summer. Possibly because it's high, you do get a breeze, so that's certainly something going for it. Yeah, these small flies certainly weren't biting midges. Did make quite an interesting photo though. Kestrels, so I was just watching. Starling, this was on the path walking down into the reserve, I think. You often look at starlings and they do look quite boring, but when you're that close, the colours are absolutely incredible. And strangely, starlings are in decline in the UK. You would think they wouldn't be. UK starlings are in decline, but we do get visited by 40 million visitors over the winter months. But our native starlings are in decline, so yeah. Orange tip, first of the butterflies. This one, do see quite a few butterflies up there, but again, with it being high and breezy, possibly not as many as I would like. Again, always take a little macro camera, because if there's no birds or mammals around, it's always great. There's loads of insects and flies to take. Unless the sparrows are taking them. Yeah. There's obviously plenty of insects around because there's a lot of things do feed on them. Don't often see house sparrows up there. You do at the farm on the way, but actually this one was on the path of the reserve, so I think they avoid it possibly just because of the buzzards and the kestrels maybe, and the sparrowhawk. Occasionally see hares up there, so this is a brown hare. Usually, again, this is late spring now, so you'll see them. Buzzard this time with another poor vole or mouse. Again, circling around, just showing that he's caught something for a bit, and then off somewhere. have been, as much as there's not midges, occasionally I've had a couple of horsefly bites, and because I have my macro camera, I do like to get a picture before I get rid of the horsefly. So this is a horned horsefly. Strangely, it's only the females that bite. Males are vegetarian. That's my finger in the bottom of the screen. I'm lucky that I don't react like I know some people react awfully to them. And the next picture again, that's my arm this time. I was taking pictures of some beetles, I think. It was either beetles or flies on a flower, and I felt something on my arm, and that horsefly was having a good drink of me.
I think their eyes are absolutely stunning though. You would never think something so small, unless you've got that macro camera to focus in on these eyes, you would never see them like that. So just amazing.
Yeah. This is one of the water rails. So this year in particular, it was quite successful for breeding water rails up there. So I was happy enough to see the water rail, but to see the water rail with a chick was, very exciting, really. I think there was 3 breeding pairs up there this year, but it's so hard to know because they're very elusive. They do get chased off a lot by the moorhens up there as well. They definitely don't like each other. The moorhen's a bit bigger and a bit more powerful. Ladybird. This is a Willow Warbler. Again, you can see no shortage of food, particularly this time of year. This must be end of May, June time. Plenty of caterpillars and flies around. Another yellowhammer. I've tried not to include too many. That's the last yellowhammer, I promise. Hawthorne. Very good for Hawthorne. Seems to be extremely popular with all birds and insects. So if you're going to be planting anything new this year, do consider a Hawthorne. This is a northern marsh orchid, as far as I know. Not an expert on plants, but I'm pretty sure this is a northern marsh orchid. Do get quite a lot of these up at the reserve. Great display of colour, obviously liked by a lot of the insects as well. This is I've forgotten what type of bee it is, but nice thing with this photo is if you look closely on its head between its eyes, you'll see its 3 other eyes. So most people don't know that bees have 5 eyes. Those 3 top ones don't see in the same way that the large eyes do, but they do detect shadows and movement. So they're more defensive eyes. But certainly not many people know that they have 5 eyes. This one here, I call them John, Paul, George and Ringo, but they are just beetles. And again, I've forgotten, I think they're thick-legged beetles, thick-legged flower beetles on a buttercup, so you can get an idea of the size. Buttercup's not particularly big, and there's 4 of them all resting on pretty much 1 petal, 2 petals. And again, you can see if the big stuff's not out to take pictures of, then there's always great small things going on. Another African visitor, a whitethroat. They dart in and out of the hedge at the back. Angry crow. Very intelligent. You'll normally see the crows chasing the buzzards away up there. It does seem to be a bit of a race. You would think the buzzards would have the upper hand, but actually because the crows travel in 3 and 4, they quite often chase the buzzards off. Definitely don't like buzzards being around. This was quite an incredible thing to witness as well. So on the right, you've got a water rail. And as we were watching the water rail, a weasel jumped out of the undergrowth to try and catch it. This was a long way away at the far end of the pond. But just to see that, to be watching a water rail out in the open is rare enough, but to then watch a weasel try and catch it. Luckily, you'll see the water rail's tail managing to get away, and the weasel didn't get him. Pretty sure it's a weasel and not a stoat, but could be corrected on that. Buzzard flying by. That's a horribly named flesh fly on a buttercup. That's I think that's a female orange tip. That's a snipe sitting up high, which is again quite rare. Sniper, as in somebody that shoots, got that title if they could shoot a flying snipe because they fly so erratically and fast. So if you're a very good shot, you could and manage to shoot a snipe, you could become a sniper. But obviously, I only shoot them with my camera, not a gun. Far too nice to shoot. Very hard to spot when they're down in the grass. So quite nice occasionally to see one up. This, as far as I know, is a southern marsh orchid, just about to bloom. And that's what that one looks like. But again, I'm not entirely sure. It may just be another type of marsh orchid, but I do believe the dark ones are usually the north and the lighter ones are southern marsh orchids. This one is cowslip, and that is lady's bedstraw. I had to look the name up there just to remind myself. And interestingly, the yellow from that flower is used to colour double Gloucester cheese. Bit of a random fact. Yeah. One of the poor sticklebacks and a heron. Included this one just because it's quite an unusual angle where you can see heron's eyes either side of its head having a pretty good view down the side of its beak, and another poor stickleback gone. And they just eat those for hour after hour. This one is a Cinebar Caterpillar, which pretty much exclusively feeds on ragwort plants. When the reserve was strimmed, the path needs trimmed because it's grass down either side. They were asked not to strim the ragwort plants specifically for these caterpillars. So they will devour these plants completely, really, then turn into a cocoon over winter and emerge in the spring as a really nice butterfly. And ragwort is poisonous, which is why it's bad for horses and cows and things to eat it, but the caterpillar eats it and absorbs the toxin to become poisonous. And the bright orange colour warns things that it's poisonous, so it's actually benefiting from eating that poison. This one here is a wood butterfly. Now, this is in with my Cathkin pictures, and I'm pretty sure it was there, but this is probably the only picture I wasn't 100% sure of. I'm almost certain it was at Cathkin. I think it's a small wood butterfly. This one here is a Horsetail Plant. I managed to get the sun behind it. So this is the seed pod at the top of a Horsetail Plant. And when I was young, we used to use these as prehistoric trees when we were playing dinosaurs. And I recently found out that 350 million years ago, prehistoric trees would have looked similar to these, but been 30 meters high. So I was not far away. Fascinating, particularly when they're lit up like that. Quite unusual. Later on in the summer, I get loads of these fungus gnats. Fascinating to watch because bright yellow, and they're completely black other than that, these yellow stripes, and they do hang about in quite big groups, so quite interesting ones to watch. That one there, I've forgotten the name of. So I'm just going to pass that one. Ragged Robin. Get this up there. Very nice looking flowers. Ragged because each petal is split into 4. It looks quite ragged. Pretty self-explanatory. Grasshoppers, male and female. I think female's the bigger of the two. I think the male's the small one. Again, approaching it probably more from a photographic point of view. Quite often I'll take photos and then go back and try and learn afterwards. This is meadowsweet. Lots of meadowsweet during the summer. Gets its name because they used to sweeten mead with it. And this one is Rose Bay Willow Herb. Again, great big patches of that. Absolutely teeming with bees and wasps. Yeah, great big areas of that. This one is a green-veined white butterfly sticking its tongue out at me on a clover. Again, I do love taking macros. Sedge warbler with a mouthful of dinner and Rose Bay Willow Herb. There was a bench at the top of the reserve, which one day we were up there and noticed this pile of sawdust at the bottom. Obviously knew something was wrong. And then a few weeks later, the bench collapsed and there was these woodcarver wasps living in it. Great little wasps to watch, come and go. Look quite different to the wasps that you're more familiar with. These are big heads and big mandibles for eating through the wood. We incidentally saved the wooden bench and have it in the garden now to turn into an insect hotel because it's quite rotten. So the bench didn't go to waste. It's late summer scene, tall grass, lovely up there. Get plenty of swallows and martins visiting. Great watching them skim over the water. Unfortunately, I didn't get any pictures of that, so this one's on a rather boring wire. This one is a small copper butterfly, which a few of the regulars up there were very keen to see this year. We only saw this one, I think. We saw this one on one day and didn't see any more, so nice to have a record shot of it, but apparently numbers of these were down quite a lot this year. Do meet a lot of people that are up there that are interested in different fields, and some of them butterflies more than others, and they made us aware that this particular one was certainly a lot scarcer. Close up of a water rail. Not quite hard to see them again out as close as that. So that one's in probably the best image I got of one all year. This is an early morning shot, just walking through the reserve. And if you look carefully, every now and again, a head will pop up. That's an adult bow deer. Usually there'll be 3 or 4 of them nearby. And carry on walking a little bit. And yeah, if you're really lucky, you get to see one of the babies. But they're usually well hidden in the grass. This was slightly unusual. We kept seeing a swarm of wasps on Rose Bay Willow Herb. And you can see actually wasps here. You can see the one at the top middle also has the 3 eyes on top. So they're not, bees aren't the only ones with 5 eyes. Wasps also have 5 eyes. But they were swarmed around these plants and we couldn't really figure out what was going on. And then later on, we found out, you'll see in this picture, the pink coating of the plant, they eat that because it's sweet and full of sugar. You can see where it's been stripped at the bottom below the wasps. So it was really strange behavior to witness. Since found out they do use Rose Bay Willow Herb to flavor some ice creams and things. Apparently it is used as a natural sweetener. And the wasps obviously enjoyed the sugar rush. This was a green Sandpiper, which was a one-off sighting up there for us. A little bit unusual to see one up there. I never knew that ladybirds look like that before they turn into ladybirds. Very, very different, quite fascinating. This picture was, again, taken from a long way off, and I thought it was 2 kestrels chasing each other. It wasn't until I came home and put it on the computer and cropped in a bit closer that I could see that it was a sparrowhawk chasing a kestrel. So you see they're really quite similar sizes, different pattern on the tail in particular. The sparrowhawk has those definite bands, whereas the kestrel has just the band at the end of the tail and the whiter face. Yeah, so they were chasing each other, and I couldn't really make out at the speed they were going that it was sparrowhawk and kestrel. Tortoiseshell butterfly on a thistle. Yeah, small tortoiseshell. I don't think we get the large ones much in the UK anymore. Bit of a grisly one, I'm afraid. This one is a shield bug drinking a caterpillar. Yeah, when we talk about predators up there, we always think of the birds of prey and probably the heron and the fox and the weasel, but I think the insect world is far more brutal than anything you'll see with these big things. This is a close-up of dandelion seeds. Just like the picture. Dandelion clock, sorry, I should call it. There are ravens up there. This again was taken just outside the reserve, but the ravens do come over. Quite interesting how much bigger they are than regular crows. Really quite powerful big birds. Guessing that's male and female. But, well, I think the male will be the larger one in this instance. Green bottle on, I think that was just a thistle. I think flies, I'm going to add to bees and wasps. Flies also have 5 eyes. Actually, no, they've got hundreds of eyes because they've got compound eyes, but including the 3 on top, they've also got the extra eyes. Fox hunting again. Green leaf hopper. Get different types of hopper up there. These ones are the nicest colours. This was us actually going back to take the broken bench away. I think it was rotten anyway, which is why the wasps had decided to nest in it. But I think the nest also contributed to it collapsing. This one is a red darter, I think, common darter. Didn't see that many dragonflies up there this year. I think the pathwast areas of the marsh that were better for dragonflies. So whether it's just because we weren't in the right area or whether there was not quite so many this year, I'm not sure. This was just on the hide, on the walkway to the hide. These are nettle moths. These are micro moths. You can see by the size of the dandelion underneath there. These are tiny little moths, but there's thousands of them. So you quite often will get 3 or 4 all on the same flower. Some sort of shield beetle. Didn't quite manage to figure out what that one was. I think it's a shield beetle, but again, could be wrong. A noon fly. See quite a few of these, and they're quite striking in the coloration of the bright gold head. Often hang about in groups sunbathing. This is clearing some, so up at the reserve until recently, they had cattle which were allowed in this area, and they chewed up the ground and made divots in the grass, which was great for snipe. For several reasons, they've not been able to get cattle up there. It's too waterlogged at the moment with COVID restrictions and feeding and things. So this year they did cut a grid pattern in, and some of us cleared large quantities of grass to try and encourage the snipe, but unfortunately it wasn't a success. So it's a learning curve, trying to do best they could, but in this instance it wasn't particularly successful. Hopefully an alternative will be found. Unidentified insect eggs. Just thought it was fascinating the way that they were all stuck to one stem in a row like that. Kestrel. Again, sometimes we've just got to clear parts of the path. You can see the path there is quite waterlogged behind Jan. These big reeds this time of year are knee high, and then by then they're 8 feet high and encroaching on the path. So try and keep the path clear. Nice blackbird. Coincidentally, blackbirds are the UK's most populous breeding birds, which you wouldn't have thought. Always nice to see though. Different time of year. This is coming, this is autumn now. You can tell foliage starting to die back. Looks a bit damper. Goldfinch, still some colour in the reserve. Again, just trying to keep the walkways clear. The walkway to the hide was getting quite slippy, so we cut all the undergrowth back, and then we got more anti-slip stripes put on the walkway there, just to make sure it was safe for everybody. Doing a good job. It's looking back up the walkway to where you can park. Litter picking and field fares in the winter. Quite often see them hiding in the bushes. They're they don't like being seen, actually, field fares. We had one here in the garden last year, and it would hide in the hedge, and yeah, it would come out occasionally for food, but they certainly do like to remain hidden. Managed to get a flock of fieldfare. That's quite a flock of fieldfare flying by. Just as well I said that right. Yeah. So as much as they're elusive, that's a whole group of them. My favourite duck, the teal duck. You quite often get teal up there. It's the UK's smallest duck. Great green colours on their wings and their eyes. Always like to see them up there. They also like this in the fields nearby. There's also some puddles that they like as well. They like shallow water because they're small ducks. I don't think they're deep diving ducks. So yeah, always good to see. Have started to see goldcrests up there on the path and around the entrance. So if you want to see Europe's smallest bird with its bright yellow mohican, I think we saw 3 in one go at one point. So yeah, definitely need to look out for them though, because they are so small. I am a registered drone user, so I did fly up from the car park to take an aerial shot from there. This is out of season when no birds were around. Just thought I'd take a picture to show you what the grid pattern looked like. So that's the area that was cleared, but it's a shame that it was not particularly successful. You'll see down on the bottom left coming, there's a row of trees that we were working on last week as well. You get a better idea. So that's almost the whole reserve in that single shot there. You can see the reed beds over to the right. There's more reed beds up to the top left-ish by those trees, but that certainly covers most of the reserve and the pond. That's a female stone chat, not got the black head that the male has. Cutting back the walkway, these are, what's that called? Blackthorn. So these are really quite jaggy hedges. So Billy did most of the cutting, and Jen and I cleaned it up and took it away so that it didn't puncture people's tyres or shoes or dog paws as they went down the path. Good tidy up going into winter, going down there. You can tell what the weather was like by the rainbow. Replanting, so the trees, some of the trees last year didn't take, so they were the ones that have bent over are ones to replace. So yeah, this is a hazel trees getting planted to provide more cover and a windbreak and a bit more of a wildlife corridor as well. So up there planting them in the rain the other day. This was just a few weeks ago. This was December, just walking through, absolutely magical. There's one corner with willow, isn't it? Yeah, there's one corner where you walk through some willow and just the way the snow was sitting and the sun was shining through. Yeah, really nice. You can tell by this next slide, we're on to the last few slides now. The next few do have 8 legs. So if any of you have an aversion to 8-legged things, you may want to just close your eyes for a few minutes just while I quickly do these last few slides, and then we'll hand back to Kevin. So this first one actually isn't a spider. It's called a Harvestman, and it's an arachnid, so it does have 8 legs. but it's got a single body part and slightly different to a spider. It's only got 2 eyes, but people who don't like spiders probably are not going to like that. I did warn everybody. Not a spider again, a crane fly, but again, people that don't like spiders often don't like crane flies. Daddy longlegs, they are really quite good because they are pollinators. They eat pollen, so they go plant to plant, and they actually do us a big favor, even though they look like flying spiders. Yeah, so do be nice to them. A wolf spider. You'll see wolf spiders are quite unusual in the way that they carry their young. Really quite quick across the ground as well, so always hard to get a picture of. But fascinating when you can see them carrying their young like that. Zebra spider. This was sitting, probably shouldn't tell you this, I might put you off going. It was sitting just on the hide. And was quite happy. Yeah, these are minuscule. You wouldn't even notice it was there really. Little jumping zebra spider. Was quite happy to pose for some photographs. Not a spider again, but a bit creepy. This is a Clover Mite. Again, really quite small, but struggled to get a good picture of it because it was traveling quite quick over the undergrowth. Looked, I for a horrible minute, I did think it could be some sort of tick, but no, it's a Clover Mite. So if you do see a horrible looking red thing like that. And this one here is a hammock spider. You can see it weaves a sort of hammocky type web and then hangs from it. And included this because it's fascinating how clear their legs and their body is. Another daddy longlegs. This time very close up. And that's it. So hopefully how do I hand back over?
That's fine, Neil.
Yep.
I've got you. Neil and Jan, thank you very, very much. I would imagine that for all those who are listening in, if that talk hasn't inspired them to get out and into nature and up to Cathkin, I really don't know what will. Now, we've got a range of questions that have come in. So as I suggested at the beginning, what I'll do is I'll put those to both of you just now. And once we've gone through those, and a few are still coming in, once we've gone through those, we'll open it up to the floor. If anybody does want to ask a question over video, they can do so. So initially, a question from Anna, who unfortunately has had to leave a bit early, but she was asking how accessible is the marsh for mobility scooters or wheelchairs? You guys are up on a regular basis, so maybe you can just enlighten us as to what the current situation is.
Quite an interesting question because my sister needs a mobility scooter. The marsh from the entrance at the road, the path is very accessible. The hide is very accessible. The path most of the way round is also very accessible. There is one part, there was a small bridge at one part, which they've now changed to a path, which has a slight camber to it. So you would just need to be a little bit cautious there. It should be fine. I wouldn't go up when it's particularly wet, though, although you're probably not going to want to go when it's particularly wet. The path and the hide are certainly dry. So yeah, you could certainly see most things from a mobility scooter without any issue at all.
There is
Fantastic.
A kissing gate to get through at the
entrance. Oh, there is a
so
kissing gate at the entrance. It's
whether,
quite a large one, though.
Yeah.
I don't know if a scooter could get through.
If somebody with a mobility issue was visiting or wanted to visit, Jan and I could always go up. We've got the combination to there is a gate that we can unlock.
Super, that's great, Neil. You read my mind there in terms of that follow-on question in terms of getting in. Related to that, Katrina was asking parking in terms of the best place to park to access the reserve. Now, you know, I'm a regular up there like yourself, but what would you be recommending to new visitors there? Because obviously parking next to the reserve is limited, isn't it?
Do you want to?
Yeah, there is a small parking. It's just unfortunately a small bay, but it can take 3 or 4 cars. But what you do, it's such a small and very out of the way reserve that you never go up there, and you know there's lots of people. So if you do decide to go up, you'll find you might just be one of 2 or 3 people. Obviously a very sunny day brings everybody out, but if you go up where you think, well, it's a nice day, it's lovely to get some fresh air, you know, it's not raining, let's go up and spend some time up there, you'll find that you should get parked. It's like a little hidden gem. Not a lot of people know about it, and anytime we've gone, there's never been in too many cars that we can't get parked.
I think I would need to confirm this, but I'm pretty sure if you're a member of the SWT, you can get given the combination, but I would need to just clarify that. There is quite limited parking, but we've never been in the situation where we've not been unable to get parked, so.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Neil. Now, Sean is just mentioning that you could also walk in from Cathkin Braes as well to access the reserve.
Yeah, you can come in from that side as well. So there's a big car park at Cathkin Bray if you don't mind a slightly longer walk.
Excellent. Super.
Sorry, Kevin. Could I just ask what the name of the road is, or is there a name, or is there a?
Oh, that's a good question.
Is there a signpost or something to look out for?
It's. Do you want to look? Can we come back to that one?
Of course, thank you.
Yeah, Jan, get on Google now. Google Maps, right?
I think it's Cathkin Road, actually. I think it's Cathkin Road.
Yeah. Now, I'm sifting through the superlatives in relation to the journey you've taken us on there. Understandably, and not at all surprisingly, there are many, many people just marveling at the quality of the pictures, Neil. So, you know, amongst those, some very, very excellent photographers themselves, David and Janet Palmer being one. David was very kindly helping out there, suggesting that the yellow flower he thought was a yellow loosestrife, and the bee was a common carder.
Thank you.
So he's posted that to everybody, but I'm just getting that out for those who can't access.
Thank you for that, David. I had it written down, but I was trying not to read from a script.
And Lynn saved you a bit of work on Google there. Lynn is suggesting that it's Cathkin Road as the access road.
Yeah. It is. There's a description on the SWT website of how to get there.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for looking that up.
Okay, so I'm having a wee look to see now a question that's probably popped into a lot of people's minds, but asked by Anne. How many visits did it actually take you to compile all of those pictures that you've showcased tonight, Neil?
I would say over the last year, we've probably averaged 2 to 3 visits a week. Some of them are on the way to work, particularly on a Sunday morning is a great time. We start a little bit later on a Sunday, so we tend to go up on Sunday if it's nice enough. On the way to work in the summer, we'll quite often come back via work. So if you see somebody with a camouflage coat and a suit and shirt, it's probably me. But yeah, I would say 2 to 3 times a week over the course of the year. I think there was one month where it was quite hard for us to go. It was maybe October or November, we didn't get up as much for one reason or another. But overall, yeah. It's always nice to get up there, and you will always see something, and you'll meet interesting people up there, and there's better photographers than me up there as well. It's great. You learn from people up there, whether it's you're learning about the plants or the insects or the birds or the photography, and then best of all is just being up there for some fresh air and away from the life, really, just the noise of the city.
It's one of the things I actually have to agree with. There's the people that we meet there are just so lovely, and everybody just wants to be there. We've all got something in common, whether it's just, you know, being outside, being in nature, or photography. And there's like almost not a community, but just faces you recognize, and just such lovely, lovely people. I'm very grateful to have met them anyway. So it's really, really nice to have met them all.
Neil, I'm just going to pick up on a point you mentioned earlier. It would be remiss of me not to, because Cathkin Marsh is obviously the local patch for the Clarkson East Kilbride group within SWT, and it's a good point that you made in relation to the habitat and the impact on snipe. As you know, we've been in discussions with the reserve manager Billy Gray regarding this, and Billy's been very honest and open in terms of what they've been trying to do there. I'm part of the Clyde ringing group, and we ring quite regularly up there, the jack snipe, and clearly Neil made reference to the fact that they haven't been able to put cattle into the area last year, and that did have an impact on jack snipe numbers. We're hoping on an ongoing basis that we might get to a point whereby we can find an alternative there to reinstate that habitat that will make it suitable for jack snipe. So we recognise the limitations and we recognise the challenges that are faced, but equally, you know, as a group, we're hoping that we can move forward, because the marsh was actually the premier site within certainly Scotland, possibly the UK, for jack snipe. And about 3 or 4 years ago, we actually had a satellite tag bird which had gone from Cathkin over to Russia and back to Cathkin the following year. So we've been able to track the movements of those birds. So again, just to acknowledge the great work that you guys are doing, the reserve management are doing, and just to acknowledge our hope that we can at some point move forward with that habitat management. Okay, let me just have a wee look and just see what other questions have come through. Yeah, Jim Coyle, who's no stranger to birds and wildlife and nature management. Thank you so much for sharing your photos. Must visit the reserve. That'd be fantastic, Jim. And Keel to everyone. Amazing talk. I was up tonight, been a few times, always seen the usual members. Amazing to see the diversity. What time of year did you manage to see the most diversity at the reserve?
Definitely the summer months. So May, June, July, I would say, because you've got all the plants, all the insects, most of the birds. Definitely over the summer months it comes alive. And you can go up there, and some of those early pictures when it's covered in snow and you think you're not going to see anything, you will see stuff. And in some respects it's nice because it's so quiet and picturesque and just peaceful as well. So I don't always have to see something. Sometimes it's just nice to be there in the moment. And then you've got the weather as well, the clouds, yeah. Whether you see an ice halo or cloud formation or watching the turbines over at Whiteley, yeah, it's peaceful. But definitely the summer months are the time to see the most.
Okay, question from Shona Brown. Shona's asking, what's the rarest bird you have seen on the marsh?
Probably the hen harrier is probably, it's probably not the rarest bird, but actually up at the marsh, the hen harrier and the jay have been one-off sightings. I think most people struggle with a water rail, but this year just seemed to be plenty of them. I was quite surprised how often we would see water rail up there. One of the regulars did see an osprey fly over, so that has happened this year. I saw an osprey locally, but not there. Yeah, I think that watching the hen harrier hunt over the grass was probably one of the highlights and what I would regard as rare for there.
Okay. So I'm going to throw the evening open now to anybody that does want to ask a question over video. And just while I give people an opportunity to unmute themselves, Jim Coyle has followed up by saying that he was one of the officers in Glasgow City Council that helped get the reserve gifted to the SWT. So you owe Jim a special thank you, Neil, when he eventually makes it up to the marsh, which he's promising to do.
Yeah,
Oh, wonderful.
he should get up there. I'm pretty sure I see his pictures on another bird site locally.
Yeah. Okay, anybody want to unmute themselves and put a question to Jan and Neil?
Oh, Kevin.
Yes, Paul.
We have actually had short-haired owls on the reserve. I don't suppose you saw those.
We didn't, but we did see a feather that Richard found up there. So we had a short-eared owl feather, but not the actual bird.
The other point of interest, a few years ago, a pair of grey-lag geese nested. The Canada geese came and chased them away and used their nest. And when they had their goslings, one of the goslings was a grey-lag goose gosling.
That's wonderful.
Where that one in your picture.
Yeah. Mystery greylag,
That's
yeah.
wonderful.
You see both of them up there, but it's fascinating that they hatched one of the others.
Okay, folks, I am conscious of time, but there again, I was not remotely surprised that we're taking the time and we're getting lots of questions. And I don't really want to miss out the last couple that have come in. So Emma is asking, Neil, what size of lens do you use for the bird shots? And presumably, what type of lens as well?
Yeah, so that lens is, it's a Sigma. So I use Canon cameras, but that's a Sigma lens. And it's a 150 to 600 millimeter, which is a very popular wildlife range. And the Sigma is about a third of the price of the Canon one, or Nikon one if you use Nikon. Sigma make lenses for both of them, and Sony as well if you happen to be a Sony user.
And your camera, is it a full frame or a crop sensor you've got in your camera?
I use both, actually. Most of those would have been a crop sensor, but I'm finding that the full frame is probably better.
Okay. Good. Emma's delighted because she's just ordered a Sigma. So there we go. Job nearly done, Emma.
Good. Like I said at the start, I think it's possibly the best thing I've ever bought. The hours of fun I've had from that lens.
Yeah. Again, I just want to capture the fact that there's quite a few people suggesting that there's a book in this, Neil. So I reckon the two of you should get working on that. Okay. So no more questions then. Anybody else? Last chance to ask your final question before we wind up for the evening.
Just like to thank Neil and Jan and say what fantastic photographs there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank everybody for having a look, and it's been fantastic to be up there and do a little bit to help. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. For those of you that are still with us, can I just remind you that our next talk, believe it or not, is a face-to-face talk on the 21st of March in the Duff Memorial Hall in Busby. And it is Phil Monroe talking about the South of Scotland Golden Eagle project. So we would love to welcome you along to that, booking on Eventbrite as it was for this talk tonight. Neil, Jan, can I thank you both very much for an absolutely fantastic talk this evening. I would fully expect that you're going to be fully booked out with other organisations going forward. Please try and reserve a wee space in your calendar for us next year, because I'm pretty sure we'd like to have you back.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, thank you.
One last point, actually, with the longer nights coming in, if anybody does want to meet us up there and get a quick tour, not that there's you're not going to get lost up there, but if you want somebody to show you, then certainly we don't mind. We'll be up there various evenings over the summer months.
Okay, so if anybody wants to take Neil and Jan up on that, if you email me at cek.swt@gmail.com, I can do my best to make that happen. There's all sorts of restrictions in terms of data protection, in terms of who we can contact and how we can contact. So that's your portal into getting that one-to-one tutorial from Jan and Neil up at the marsh. Okay, thank you again, folks.
Thank you
Absolutely
so much.
fantastic evening.
Thank you
And
so
thank you,
much.
everybody, for tuning in.
Thank
Bye
you.
then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.